But my great concern was that all of these terrible things would happen, and there'd be like 24 hours of just like, and then we would all just collectively move on. But like those of us in the community were really, I mean, Myra and I talked after the Atlanta shootings, and I'm not really have to say much of a crier. I was like, I felt enraged. I felt murderous. I was like sobbing. I mean, I felt very emotional, the most emotional I felt in a long time. And it caught me completely by surprise. And I think part of the emotionality of that was just this feeling inside myself of like, I want to do something. I want to do something now. I want other people to do something, but I'm too afraid to do something. It's that kind of conflict of where you feel sort of helpless inside yourself, and you hope, okay, hopefully there'll be a champion. We'll rise and save our people, whatever that means. You know?
Yeah. For the audience, can you talk a little bit about how you know each other and how your relationship has come to be over the years?
Well,
Give me the whole thing right now.
I
No
remember.
pressure.
I remember Fleur from MSM actually. I was there in 99 to '01, and I don't think that you were like a fully matriculated student at that time, but you came for lessons or something because
yeah, I
how'd
was
you.
just about to start at Columbia University for my undergrad, and I was in pre-college, and then I came in '01 for some lessons. Yeah, like once a month. I was
Hmm.
starting to dabble a little bit.
Hmm.
And yeah, and then I went to MSM, for my master's a little bit later. But yeah, so we crossed paths then.
Also in Urbania.
That's right.
I think we were there together, right? In
That's right.
2001, maybe?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I was a senior in high school.
Oh my, I had no idea that you were so young. I thought you were one of us. I mean, you know what I mean. But oh my God, you were a
Yeah,
senior in high school?
Man,
yeah,
I
yeah.
couldn't have told the difference between a soap opera and an opera when I was a senior in high school.
Wow. My goodness.
Yeah.
That's
I
amazing.
was totally overwhelmed by every aspect of that whole experience.
Laura, I
Um,
think you look exactly the same as you did back then. Like,
I hate
the
people like that,
Asian
right?
genes,
nothing's changed.
Asian genes, man. Yeah. We're gonna look like spring chickens forever.
Until we don't.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because Myra and I,
Colonialism is bad for the skin. I can tell you, it's terrible.
um, yeah, it's funny because we have actually only been like real friends for a year, just over. Well, been about a year, but it feels. I feel like we're soul sisters. But basically, Myra and I, after the decades have passed, she was just recounting, we reconnected because we were sort of thrown together in a way for a very weird gig, which was at the 92nd Street Y last March. And it was kind of the last gig, I feel like, before everything went into or things already were in shutdown. And there was this concert that was scheduled, and we were both replacing other people, essentially, and we were doing this recital. And Myra was a complete superhero and came in literally basically 3 days before the event itself, having never played any of the music before, and was just a complete heroine. And a lot of the repertoire had been new for me. And it can always be daunting the first time you're collaborating with somebody, because you're trying to feel each other out, and you're also feeling a lot of pressure. And but it was just a really special, quite stressful, I think, for both of us, but also incredibly special occasion, because it was the first time. It was one of the first things, I think, where there was performance into an empty concert hall. And now we're so used to that and the whole digital format of everything, and like cameras being there. But that was first time for both of us. And we had, I think, something like almost 80,000 viewers for that event, because people hadn't gotten to the point where we are now. We're like, oh, not another
Not
digital,
another one.
Yeah. It's like I have to pay people to watch. It's like, Mom, can you
Please.
please watch my screencast? Yeah,
Yeah,
back then,
three different devices, please.
yeah. It was
every
before
every
that
opera
time.
professional right now is
Yeah,
literally understanding what it's like to be in a band and have to
Oh
promote
no,
your own gigs. Hey,
seriously.
can y'all come to see my band this weekend? Yeah, yeah. We'll be sure. Yeah, I'm gonna
Sure.
be right there. I gotta check my sketch. I just gotta.
right.
Yeah, I did a concert like 2 weeks ago. It's called the Musical Storefront kind of series, pop-up series,
Hmm.
sponsored by the Alphadine Foundation and the Kaufman Music Center.
Hey, nice plug.
Um, but they basically took a emptied retail space on 62nd and Broadway. So it's an empty, just like behind the windows, and they put a grand piano and microphones behind there. So we perform, and then they project the sound out onto the street.
I love that.
So then people just walking by would just stop and listen, and they put a QR code on the window so they could get the program. And we did an hour-long program 3 times in a row, and I had so much fun. I was just like, and I felt like kind of low pressure because like you're doing it out onto the street,
Yeah,
sort of,
yeah,
you know what I
yeah.
mean? So I was just like doing our thing. I was with Laquita Mitchell, and it
I
was just,
saw hers. I saw that because it was online. I saw
yeah,
the
it was
clip
just
of that.
so fun. And I was like, oh my God, I miss this so much.
Yeah.
So.
And the great thing about it is when the taxi drives by, it covers up all your wrong notes. They can't tell. So.
Actually, it was really funny. I was playing, it was like a more somber song, and I was playing a repeated note. And then, the trucks, when they go reverse, they go beep, beep, beep. I kid you not, it was like in harmony. It was like a third apart together. I was like, that's hilarious.
It's kind of funny. I noticed that there's a lot of relationships that have sprung up out of the pandemic. I have so many people that I have never worked with or known, but I've become really close to via Zoom and text and phone because we've lost the chance to sit around and work together. And so you guys, your relationship really did spring out of the pandemic then.
It really did.
Yeah.
I think a bonding happens when you're like put into this pressure situation together.
Yeah.
But also, I think that we just really naturally jive musically, but also as people. And it was just really fun and really just felt really right, making music together. So thankfully, Fleur has invited me to come along on really awesome adventures and projects, and especially most recent one where we did On Belonging, right? Where we featured all Asian composers and librettists in music. And that was a very, very special and important project for me. So,
Can you tell me a little bit about that project and what made you guys sort of pick
sure, Fleur, why don't
the
you?
the particular people and everything that were involved?
Mhm.
Sure. Yeah. So about a year ago, a consortium of music organizations. It was Wear Yellow Proudly, Cincinnati Song Initiative, and Oral Compass Project. So they had banded together and they decided, I think it was Cincinnati Song Initiative that was doing an entire season of celebrating the music of different ethnic minority communities. And Oral Compass Project is an initiative that just in general all the time is looking to uplift marginalized voices and just voices that don't get heard so much. So there was kind of overlap in their like artistic missions. And so they reached out to me about doing a recital around Asian composers and poets. And it was literally that open-ended. And there was no, this is the theme, or it needs to have this particular focus, and you need to work with such and such person. It was really great. It was kind of a blank slate. And I said yes, of course. And Myra was absolutely the first person that I thought of to, hop on board, and who would be just a fabulous equal in this journey. Because for me and for Myra too, it was both of our first forays into the world of Asian art song. And I mean, naively didn't even think that that was like a genre, because it's not like what in school, you have your French and your German, your Italian, and, people occasionally, I have to say, I do remember a few Korean peers at MSM. Occasionally at the end of their recital, they would do like a Korean classical piece, but it was always usually the encore, or it was kind of
Yeah.
one or two lighter pieces at the end of the program. So I never had that much awareness of Asian art song as being a legitimate thing that one could study and research and perform. And so it was really starting from ground zero, which was a very humbling feeling, because Myra and I, we both do a lot of recital and have done for many years. And just to kind of feel that you're going back to square one, it's kind of unnerving, because you have no, it's that you have these bizarre, like, where do I even start in my research? And then there's all these complicated, you get into this sort of slight swamp of, oh well, we're aiming for kind of an hour program around Asianness, but then how do you narrow down like what Asianness you choose to represent, or what composers like I'm ethnically Chinese, I'm half Singaporean, I grew up in Hong Kong, so should I only be looking at Chinese language pieces? Myra's Korean, so it's like if you want to throw in some Korean pieces, but then, oh my God, we're excluding so many people. And so like it's just
Wait, you mean Asian isn't just a block of just monolithic people? Crazy. Never heard that before.
Mention that.
But it's shocking to me how many people would think, Asian music. Like
right,
Asian music. Yeah.
right, exactly.
Like American music, it's all the same.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think the project was finally released a month ago, but it was almost a year in the making, because just the research alone took a long time. And also for me, I don't speak very good Chinese, so I speak a smattering of Mandarin, a smattering of Cantonese, but definitely not well enough to go and research like Chinese Google, or a lot of when you're looking at composers, it's all in characters, and I just don't have that knowledge base. So I was reaching out to friends of mine to ask their advice and for recommendations for composers I should research and things like that. So that took, and also you want to part of honoring the process is researching thoroughly. So I didn't want to just I'll just do the first 8 names that come my way or something, because I wanted to make sure that that we had a range of representations in terms of gender and sexuality and cultural background, and also some immigrant, like we had some composers who are still living in the motherland, so to say, and then also some folks who've emigrated to the States or out west. And so just to have a whole bunch of different experiences of Asian identity. And Myra and I we had a lot of Zoom chats, email, like long, like a 10-page long email.
Oh yeah.
God, emails.
I'd be like in the middle of like work or whatever, and I'd get like her novel of an email. I'd be like, oh my God, I need to do justice to this email. Let me respond.
I'll read this tomorrow. That's the worst thing for me. You send me an email that's more than a paragraph. I'm like, oh, do I have the 3.5 minutes it's going to take me? I don't. I'm going to have to do this tomorrow. I'm exhausted.
But I have to say that Fleur is just a master scholar and researcher in that sense. The integrity with which she really honors a piece of, music and art, and her approach to representing it, whether it's the Asian canon or whether it's, something really well known, is something that I just love and respect about her.
Interestingly, I feel like a big part of the research was about introspective digging and inquiry, and then inquiry with Myra, like what questions and answers we were generating together as kind of representatives suddenly of a whole bunch of different folks on this program. And that was a real joy. And that was really deep work that I hadn't really engaged with before in that way. Like we didn't have that much in-person rehearsal because it was kind of at the height of lockdown and all this, so we're being very careful and everything. But when we did finally get together, I would say we spent almost as much time, if not more, talking about things and what the resonance is for us more on a personal level with the poetry, with the sound worlds. Like I remember Myra had, it was interesting because we had a bunch of different musical styles. There were some pieces that sounded more like almost American musical theater. There were some that sounded like kind of classical art song. There were some very Asian harmonies and things that would be, I think, for most people, recognizably Asian sounding. And it was interesting for both of us where our comfort zones were and weren't. And it was often complimentary. I remember Myra emailed me at one point. She said, I just feel so weird about this one. Or Myra, do you want to talk about?
Oh, right. Yeah. So, well, there were like a couple different parts where I was playing it and I was like, I just don't get this. And I was like, I'm really struggling with making this authentic here. And I was, and I hate performing anything that I can't genuinely stand behind. And actually, I think more than the music itself, I was actually struggling with the poetry. And so I reached out to Fleur. It wasn't the Raymond U, it was something else. And I reached out to Fleur and I was like, hey, Fleur, I don't know about this song. To be totally honest, I was like, I'm kind of struggling with this. And then she came back and shared her perspective on the whole poetry. And it totally clicked. And it wasn't even so much that like I took on her interpretation, seeing how she was interpreting, her stance on it actually turned on the light for me to see it in my own way as well. So after that, I was like, oh my God, I totally get it now. And I think the reverse also happened for a different song where Fleur wasn't as comfortable, in that sound world. But for some reason, for me, it just really clicked. And it was so interesting knowing how she felt about that song. When I went back and watched the presentation of it, she sang that song. I was so moved. And I think, isn't it so interesting? I mean, apart from all of this, just as a musician, singer, pianist, there have been like very memorable moments for me in my performing career where I felt really uncomfortable in the piece that I was performing. And then I finish, and then the feedback that I got from people was like, they were so into it and it was so powerful and all of that. And you're like, where was I? you know? And I think as a performer, you have this sort of selfish desire, like, I want to enjoy it. A lot of times we always say, have fun, right? It's like, no matter what, have fun, right? But I find it interesting that sometimes you don't have fun, and yet the music comes alive without you having fun. And I think that is a mysterious, but also beautiful, component to music making. And I really appreciate those moments because it gives me pause to realize that there's even more than my own perspective and my own personal, slant on this piece. That sometimes when you just trust, when you do your best to pay respect to what the composer was intending, it takes a life of its own.
Discomfort sometimes in and of itself can be compelling. The
Yeah.
fact that it's that the costume doesn't fit right, or you're doing an opera on a subject, or a cycle on a subject that you may find very disturbing or uncomfortable. And sometimes that's kind of the point, right? Like, I'm uncomfortable, you're uncomfortable, let's all be uncomfortable together.
That's right. That's right. There was like an interview I saw. It was, I think, with Huang, who's like one of the most famous pianists right now, and she was saying that she had gone to like Maniacs and was talking about some really, really difficult concerto, and she was like, I never feel comfortable in the first movement. And Maniacs goes, Well, we're not paid to be comfortable.
Ah,
You know? I was like, oh,
I mean, I get that because I think when we're uncomfortable, we're more vulnerable. And
yeah.
I think as artists, that is kind of when some of those defenses go down. And, we might think in that because we're so used to being very self-critical, this sucks, this is terrible, la la la. But actually, that's when the audience perhaps can access, what the experience that we're feeling and wanting to share, maybe the easiest because some of those typical boundaries and defense mechanisms aren't so available to us. So, because the whole time we were recording, I don't think actually, Myra, we never did a debrief after that, but I felt uncomfortable we had like basically a 3-hour recording block, and we were basically looking to just go through every piece just once, unless there was a disaster, maybe twice. So we didn't have that much time. And I was just stressing about because some of the pieces were in Mandarin, some were in Cantonese, and then there were pieces in English. And so we did a lot of the Chinese language pieces first, and then we got to the stuff in English, and I could not speak English. Like literally the song in English, we did like 55 takes because every 4 words I'd be like, ugh. Idea what the words are, it was like, and so Myra was like, she was very patient, but it was just one of
oh,
those things. But I think it's just because, yeah, I just felt this weird, and I was like sweating so much, I was like, why am I, and I'm not a sweaty person. I was like, this is just, something's going on.
Damp all the time. I'm so damp.
There are like rivers.
So when you're constructing a program like this that's sort of based on on Asian composers and themes, I've noticed, like at least in the opera world, a lot of when they do decide to address, to make up for some of the inequities, or to sort of try to like reach out to the communities that have been underserved, a lot of times the entire theme of the opera or cycle centers around white oppression and the white experience in the white context. And how is that something that you actively avoided, or something that you embraced, or how did you deal with this, or was that not even an issue at all?
That's an interesting question because I think you're right that there is often in Western society
Mm-hmm.
that everything is refracted through a white lens or a Western lens, and or perhaps if the piece itself is not by, say, a white composer, often the production team will be all white or something like that. So you do get these layers of usually resonance with the traditional to you. So I think for us, I mean, there wasn't, I think it wasn't something we were deliberately trying to avoid, but just by virtue of choosing um, these Asian composers who were writing in often their own vernacular. Some of them wrote their own texts. It was not none of them. I mean, I have to say, I encountered very few pieces that were about uh, East-West relations or dynamics of oppression in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Even the kind of immigrant-y type pieces or stories that were shared through music were more about the relationship with homeland. Less perhaps because of assertive images of oppression, but more just perhaps because often if people are leaving home, it might be because home isn't so great. It could be political persecution, social inequities that you're trying to escape, or there's a whole bunch of reasons. So it's not that, you know, uh, that the homeland is this like rosy, wonderful thing necessarily. And that's what I was really drawn to as well, that it isn't about, West bad, East amazing. Like that there's so much complexity within all of our identities, no matter where we're from. And I mean, Myra and we are two, Asian women of different backgrounds. We have very different experiences of being Asian. I'm not Asian American, she is. So that was partly why we had so much to unpack and talk about just between ourselves, even like nothing to do with the music. So I think, yeah, that just didn't factor it at all. I think also I was really looking, and it was kind of when we were putting this project together, it was before the most recent uptick, upscaling of all of this anti-Asian hate crimes and aggression, which has just been so distressing. But I think the instinct for all of us, for Myra and I, and also the rest of us, the rest of the team that was involved in producing this and the host organizations, was about putting something beautiful out into the world of Asian culture and Asian representation and identity, something that maybe people, didn't know about, or that it would just be an experience that I was really not interested in pushing any kind of like political agenda, or because also it's all very new and exploratory for me. I don't feel that I am an expert in something, or that I'm trying to say that something is better than something else. It's really, like, for me, art, and particularly recital work, and what the relationships we had with these pieces, really woodshedding stuff, was just so much about, like, what is on a human level, what is this about? I wasn't sitting there going, feeling incredibly Asian all the time, whatever that means. Like, it was just like, I am a human. This is a beautiful song and a beautiful text. I relate to this in some way. And why is that? And what is it about it that I want to say? And so I think, I think that is where we were hoping to help connect with people outside of the community, outside of our community. Say, it's like this, the fundamental humanity, the beauty of the music, the beauty of the poetry, and also sharing something of our own selves. And I think that is a really relevant and important thing to talk about. And I am doing this summer, I'm doing a sort of residency at the Aix-en-Provence Festival. I'm curating and performing 4 recitals around empire, colonialism, and identity. And that's all about that. Every single piece about dynamics of oppression in different ways. But this project, the Belonging Project Myra and I did, was something different. So I've been thinking a lot about, just in the wake of, this couple months of anti-Asian sort of attacks and hate crimes and things, how I want to respond to that, how I feel about that, and how I want to respond to that. Because what you're saying, it's exactly what you're saying. Is that one of the things that I have found shocking about, aside from the atrocities themselves, like the acts of violence themselves, and just kind of preying on the vulnerable, because a lot of the victims were, there have been a lot of attacks on elderly Asian people, for example. But it's like that there have been so many just bystanders, or people who don't do anything. And I think Myra had even shared something on Facebook recently, a personal anecdote where she was harassed basically in a racist way on the subway, and people just sat there and did nothing to help. And I've been hearing a lot of those types of anecdotes from friends, reading a lot of those types of things. And I find that really egregious and shocking, because just on the human level that you're talking about, Mike, it's like, even if the person being attacked doesn't look like you, or isn't one of your own, or just on a human level, wouldn't you want to help? I understand if you don't want to, I'm not a buff person. I don't work out. Like, I doubt I'd like throw myself in with fist raise and probably wouldn't do that. But I would hope that I would have, the compassion to do something. And I've been thinking a lot about, like, actually, what is the something that I would do depending on the situation? And I've come up with I've been doing a lot of, like, not even by choice, just I'll be walking around and like role playing in my mind. Okay, if I see some, what would I do? And I think I would call people over. I'd go, come on, guys, let's help. Let's somebody call the police. I would engage people, because that is engaging people's humanity, where they want to just disconnect or think, oh, this doesn't relate to me, I don't know that person, whatever that is, this hiding in the anonymity of just, mass society. I don't know what that is. And so I've also been, I've been thinking about that, and also thinking about if, say, this on belonging recital had come later, like let's say it had come now that we were starting this, would the artistic response also be different in terms of how we programmed or the message that we wanted to communicate? And in terms of thinking more about a kind of activist response to these things that are happening to help engage people in a humanistic way. Because I think that's what it's not about for me, whether it's in my kind of performer identity or just person identity. I'm really not a overt kind of super political person, like tirades on social media. That's not
Oh,
my
me
thing.
neither.
Yeah. I mean, I respect it.
Yeah,
I am.
I am. I'm totally am.
Just kidding.
I'm a nut job. My Facebook profile should come with a warning. For God's sakes.
Well, I think that's great because we need that as well. It's just like I know for me, I wouldn't feel authentic doing that. So it's like, it takes all sorts of responses and all sorts of ways of trying to engage people.
Yeah.
And I'm personally interested in trying to activate or appeal to someone's humanity. So that it isn't about, oh, this is an attack on Asians, an attack on Black people. This is whatever it's like, well, what is the risk? What does it take actually for something to resonate with somebody? That's what I'm interested in. It's like, we can't all care about everything and everyone. That's not possible. Every time I log on to the news, it's just like, so many horrible things. I can't, like what's happening in Myanmar right now. I was shocked at my own, not diffidence isn't the word, but just like that I would have thought I would want to do more than in fact, but I'm so preoccupied with what's happening to my community. I think that's such a normal human thing. It's like the things that affect the people we know or our loved ones or our people. But then what we need now in terms of help, I think, from outside our community. I mean, this whole pandemic long conversations around systemic change, the need for more inclusion, equity, diversity. I mean, in general, but also in our industry, it's like that needs to come from partnerships from all sorts of communities and people. And that, I think, is where there can be recognition on just a human level of like what is right and what we deserve and what is a good way to treat human beings. All of that kind of thing that's kind of beyond like skin color, even though that's part of it, of course.
I really appreciate what you're sharing, Fleur, because I really do agree that we can't overcome on our own, because the whole point is that we want to be valued as worthy members of society in our country, right? And that comes when other people of other backgrounds give us that validity and treat us in that way. So it's not enough for like Asians alone to just say, hey, give us just treatment. It has to come from our neighbors and vice versa, and thank you for bringing up the story that I shared on the subway. And even as hurtful as that was for me, I do understand. I mean, I live in New York City, which is one of the most desensitizing cities to live in the world, because you step outside your door and you are just, the world is thrown at you, aside from the fact that you live in a tiny cubicle of an apartment that you're paying a gajillion dollars for. And so you have to work really super long hours to just survive here. So you're exhausted, you're stressed. You have to take public MTA transportation to get wherever you're going. It's no wonder that New York cities are grumpy, because you're just stressed. You're just stretched thin. And then you walk by a lot of homeless people on the street. And I have this like inner turmoil every single time I see someone, because I'm challenged, It's like, can I help this person? Should I help this person? what's the right way to help this person? You know, does it matter? Do I play God? Like, I feel guilty actually when I give money to someone because then I see the next person and then I think, why should that person get it and this person not? Should I have waited and given it to this? It's like so complicated in here, you know? And it's so easy to disconnect and to dehumanize people. It just is, you know,
Well,
and it's
from from a personal context, you know, when you met me first, Myra, I was a conservative Republican. I was a right wing dude. I grew up in a very racist area, and racism was just part of my daily bread. And it was a long, it took a long time to deprogram that stuff. Um, when I think about some of the things in my life that come out of my mouth as an 18-year-old, as a 25-year-old, I just I, I didn't have I grew up in an area that was so homogenous and so very rigid in the constructs, religious and every kind of construct you can imagine, where racist language and racist stereotypes are part of everyday life. Everyday life. It was just normal. And deprogramming that, thank God I got into opera and classical music because I was exposed. It was almost like a sensory overload of multiculturalism and after a while you're so surrounded by diversity and things after a while that you can't maintain these attitudes. It just doesn't stand. And one of the things that as a white person that came from that sort of racist culture, the things that always that helped me sort of change my mind and change the way I thought and change my perspective was the personal experiences of people that I loved and cared about that were close to me, and their experiences of racism and of terrible things that have happened to them as a consequence of them being alive in a society. That's what sort of changed my perspective. It wasn't ever someone screaming at me or calling me a name or saying you're wrong and what's wrong with you. It wasn't that. It was this seeing like, oh my God, these people are enduring this terrible injustice and no one's doing anything about it. I had the gift of having some really close friends that told me their experiences in our business and in society at large. And what I learned from that, I mean, it gave me this, like when all this recent, tidal wave of anti-Asian hatred. I mean, it's always there. I've known about it because I have friends that told me about it, and it's always, I think, for a lot of white people, they don't even recognize that Asian musicians or Asian people in their communities have the same kinds of challenges that other minorities have. They sort of have this idea that, oh, it's fine. They don't go through this stuff like everybody else does. And I was not shocked. But I have had several conversations with some of my white colleagues that were told stories about things that had happened. And they were like, I can't believe this is happening. And I think that's like the bravery, Myra, that you've had to share your story is super important, because we're able to. I mean, it's the same way that like we as storytellers and as singers or opera singers or whatever, that way of sort of creating this empathetic space where people can sort of feel what the performer or the artist is feeling. That gives us the insight into what this is. And if you don't, Myra, I mean, I know you spoke about it on social media, but are you comfortable talking about what happened?
yeah, thank you. I really appreciated you sharing so vulnerably. That really just is beautiful and means a lot, you know, to see that. And thank you. So I mean, you know, again, like my instinct as an experienced Asian American is to downplay, right? What I went through. I'm like, it wasn't that big a deal, you know. However, it did sit with me for a long time. I was on my way to JFK, the airport in New York City, and I decided to take the E train because I didn't want to pay like $80 on the Uber. But I was
So
going,
you're going to take 3 hours to get to the airport.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Five trains.
um, and it was an international trip, so my luggage was big. It was probably exactly 49 pounds. I think I remembered on that trip, like I just slid into the weight limit, you know? I I was having trouble with my luggage because it was so big. I'm small and not very strong. And actually, so I was struggling with my luggage down the stairs. This is an addition to the story, but this very nice young white gentleman actually, like he ran up the stairs. He had gotten off his train. He came back, like I guess he had had a mental. He came back, took my luggage, carried it down the steps all the way to the bottom, and left. Didn't even make eye contact with me, like didn't want any kind of thanks or just, and I was like, oh my God, thank you for this angel, you know?
Yeah.
So then I get on the subway and so I was like lugging the luggage. So I had bumped into this man that I didn't realize, I had no idea that I had bumped into him. And he was like maybe 250 pounds to 300 pounds. Like he must have been like 6 feet maybe. Um, and he just went off on me. He started yelling at me and he started calling me names. And then he invoked Trump and he said, you know, this is why we need Trump because of these stupid Asians who are taking over our country. You know, all they care about is themselves. And he just went off. And it was one of those situations where all the seats were taken, but the standing space wasn't full, so that like everyone had full view of us, really. There were only maybe like four of us standing in the car. So they were really just all like watching, you know. And it was a while. It wasn't like 2 minutes, you know. That kind of abuse for like 10 minutes straight is pretty harsh. And I was pretty rough in the beginning, you know, because I was defending myself, you know. And I tried really hard when I engage with that kind of aggression, I try not to attack back at the same level kind of thing. And he almost was inviting me to. He was kind of overweight, you know, and he said something like, "How could you not see me? You know, I'm big and I'm fat and I'm, you know." It was almost like he wanted me to, you know,
In some
just.
way to justify his own
I'm
malice
not
and
sure what it was, but
yeah.
I recognized it like right at that moment. I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. But I defended myself, you know, and I was like, I didn't see you, you know, and, you know, I'm sorry, but stop yelling at me, you know. And then it made it worse. It was escalating, you know, and I just shut up after a while because I couldn't defend myself, you know, physically if it came to that.
Yeah.
So it's just better, you know, to be quiet. So it's funny because he eventually had to get off the train and I had to turn again to adjust my luggage. And I noticed that he saw me do that. And I think it was the first time that he saw the luggage. And I wondered, I had this like second of a feeling where it was like, I think he might have just realized that I actually didn't see him, you know, and bumped into him accidentally. But right then he like exited the train, right? So then I'm standing there in this awkward silence, you know, and I did look around the train and I looked particularly to the row of people who were sitting right next to me and they were all Asian men, funnily enough, you know, and they just kind of looked at me and looked away, you know. So it was upsetting. Yeah, it was very upsetting. I got to the airport, called my husband, let him know about it, and I was shaken. And of course, I got over it, but I have to say that there's still it was a little bit traumatic for me. I have this thing also about being yelled at, which I don't handle well. And that, it did kind of, even now, like, I remember, the feeling. So, I wasn't physically harmed, but it does a number on you. And actually, so Fleur, you were talking earlier about thinking of ways in which you could help in public and all of that. And I attended this, I don't know what you call it, conference. It's not a conference, but an event hosted by I Holla Back online, where they were training bystanders who want to be allies in these kind of situations. And it was so helpful. I thought it was really great because it really kind of distilled the whole concept of how to help as a bystander. Because what they said was, we often think of, if we're helping in a situation like that, we're picturing like going into like combat with this person, or like, with, whatever, right? And I was like, that's so true.
As a white male from the South, the hero complex is strong.
Yes.
So I get it. It's,
You know,
if
and
I was
I
like, I'd have shut up. Okay,
I know, I
okay,
have the
Cletus, sure you
mentality
would
too, right? And I'm like, well, I'm small, so I can hit low. Like I know what I'm going for. You know? But so you like daydream these situations, right?
have.
But they actually distilled it because a lot of these situations of hostility aren't actually physical, although you have these crazy situations, right? But you will have situations where so they gave, I think it was 4Ds, and I'm a horrible student because I can't remember what all of them were, but one of them was definitely distract, right? And it was one of my favorite because it seemed the most doable, and it was like if there's an altercation going on, you can do something like drop a book, like really loud, and the noise will just kind of burst the dynamic that's happening,
Yeah.
and maybe give the person that's being accosted a chance to kind of, escape. Or you can like spill your drink, like walking by, be like, "I'm so sorry," you know.
I got my coffee all over your mouth.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're hoping that they don't attack you for that,
Yeah.
Or if you're at the grocery store, like wedging your shopping cart in between them. Like, oh, sorry, I need some space. Social distancing.
6 feet.
You know what I mean? And I loved all of these ideas, and delay was one of the words. And actually, Fleur, your idea of like calling other people, to come help and inviting them, like even assigning and saying to someone like, you know what, if you call 911, I'm going to go and try and distract, so inviting, other parties to participate in that way. So it was really, really helpful. And so now I was like, I think I'll carry something heavy in my bag that I can drop. I don't know, you know what I mean? Like I've had different thoughts since
An
then.
encyclopedia.
I finally found a use for this damn thing. I've been holding on to it since the 80s.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've had different thoughts since then. I was like, maybe I'll just carry a wine bottle and like whack them. I have thought
I
about
have
getting
so
one
many
of
great visuals right now between your comment about like hitting low and the shopping
A
cart and a
combination
drink
pack.
and a book, and you're like, right.
You always carry this much stuff with you?
Myra, why is your bag so heavy?
Is that a candelabra? What is that?
Totally, And my latest idea though is I kind of want to get one of those, like, what are those called? The really loud horn things.
An air horn, like.
Oh, yeah. And I was like, oh, that's probably not illegal because I know mace is illegal.
Yeah. Can't mace them. You can mace their ears.
Exactly. So anyway, just
But those
wanted
kinds of experiences, I mean, conflict in and of itself, it sticks with you. Road rage, mask conflicts. I've had a few of those, or seeing it hangs on you for a while. and you have to like, I mean, did you find yourself afterwards just having this sort of like almost PTSD reaction and then questioning your own actions? And you know, you almost turn that thing back on yourself, like maybe I should have handled it differently. I should have, when in reality this is nothing, has nothing to do with what you did. You were just existing in the world, and this other person decided to come and create this dissonance.
Hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. It stuck with me, and I did have that thought of like, wait, did I apologize? You know, when I hit him, or did I just react because he just like attacked me right away? I was like, maybe I didn't apologize, you know, and maybe if I had apologized, maybe he wouldn't have, you know, whatever. But I knew that I didn't know what I had done, but after he had alerted me to it in his very aggressive way, maybe I should have been more docile. I don't know. But I know inside that, you know, it wasn't warranted. And there was something about him that was a little bit off. You know, I don't know if he was mentally healthy, to be honest. And so, I mean, it's interesting thinking about all this like anti-Asian these events, but also you know the Black Lives Matter, and you just think about well, I've been thinking about how you know most of the events are happening from mentally unstable people, right? And that is a bigger issue almost because they are a product of what they encountered in their lives, you know, and they are a product of the lack of resource that they had in their lives, you know, which then points to the bigger system of our country and how are we able to take care of these people. It feels to me like this wave of anti-racism, anti-Asian racism that we're seeing is somewhat the signs of a pent-up, the suffering that we've had, you know, through the pandemic, but also not just the pandemic, but pre-pandemic. There's just been a lot of bottled up hurt that I believe is leaking out in different ways now. And these are just signs to me that, to me, it makes perfect sense, you know. And
There's a thing within, particularly the Asian community, I'm sure others as well, of this kind of culture of silence, which goes along with this kind of model minority attitude of, oh, I don't want to brew any trouble. I don't want to cause problems. I'm just going to work hard, keep my head down, not say anything. You know, this whole pattern, which is like a pan-Asian thing, especially I think with the immigrant experience, and especially in the older generations, which is why it's been really distressing, I think. I mean, it's distressing to see attacks on elderly people, but especially for me, elderly Asians, because all the elderly Asians in my family are, you know, they're not, it's extra hard for them to stand up for themselves. I'm just talking on like an emotional
Mm-hmm.
level, especially women. Like there's all these cultural things. And so for me, it's like, there's extra layers of vulnerability that come with attacking an elderly Asian woman or something, just in my mind, I think, because I think of my grandma, my grand aunts, my aunts, like that, all those generations of women who just, where whatever suffering or whatever things they're going through has always been in silence, and trying to pry something out of them. It's like, gotta be the right day. It's once a year when the sun is shining. I mean, it's, you know, it's like, gotta be a miracle.
Yeah.
And so my greatest fear with all of this was like what Myra's story, actually, I hadn't realized that, Myra, about your story, was that row of silent Asian men. But it's not just about non-reactions from people outside the community, or kind of not caring or having a passing interest. Oh God, did you see this story? And then the next thing moved on to what the next thing. But it's also from within the community and within myself, because I was very emotionally repressed when I grew up, and it took me years to learn how to stand up for myself, just in an emotional way. And it's still a challenge for me sometimes. Yeah, it's, you know, it's not easy. But my great concern was that all of these terrible things would happen, and there'd be like 24 hours of just like, ooh, and then we would all just collectively move on. But like those of us in the community were really, I mean, Myra and I talked after the Atlanta shootings, and I'm not really have to say much of a crier. I was like, I felt enraged. I felt murderous. I was like sobbing. I mean, I felt very emotional, the most emotional I felt in a long time. And it caught me completely by surprise. And I think part of the emotionality of that was just this feeling inside myself of like, I want to do something. I want to do something now. I want other people to do something, but I'm too afraid to do something. It's that kind of conflict of where you feel sort of helpless inside yourself, and you hope, okay, hopefully there'll be a champion. We'll rise and save our people, whatever that means.
Yeah.
Like, no,
Yeah.
but we're all, and
Is
then
it me? Am I the champion? Oh.
Michael, I nominate you, be the knight in shining armor. Yeah.
The white knight, so to speak. I got you. No, yeah.
The literal white knight. There you go.
I don't think I'm qualified.
Corey endorsing with the flashing. You've got the outfit. Yeah. But the thing is, I think now I've realized like that's not going to happen, and that, which is perhaps a good thing, that the next level of change and empowerment comes. It's like more of a grassroots thing. It's just finding the courage on an individual level.
Yeah.
To like, what can I do? What do I want to do that feels authentic to me? Like we were saying earlier, I'm not going to be petitioning people in political ways, but there's other things I can do so that I don't feel so helpless. And I'm not going to convince everybody. That's not the point, But yeah, so I think, and I already feel so much better. I still feel upset when I watch these videos that are circulating on Twitter of, oh, another person, punched, whatever it is, or called racial slurs. But I feel calmer in myself because I have made a commitment to myself not to be silent. And even if that means, which I've been doing more of, just talking to one friend who, it's been a friend, and an Asian friend usually, or a couple of Asian friends, where I know we all see each other, we have these, and just sharing thoughts and ideas and feeling that solidarity. That's also something new for me. I mean, that is also an act of not being silent. So it can happen in so many ways, and I'm just beginning to explore what that can be. But that's what I would hope, I think, for everyone in our community, and just that any kind of injustice, we can all find that courage inside ourselves to even just self-question, be like, I have that reaction. Why did I have that reaction? Is that really what I want to have? And whatever it is. So I think it has to start with us. Yeah, that's all I got.
At a certain point, it doesn't matter, right? Yeah. Like your upbringing, because at a certain point, we all become adults and we become responsible for how we choose to live. And some of us have bigger obstacles to overcome than others. But to each their own lot, And I know people who have overcome incredible difficulty in their lives, who are successful and happy people, healthy and whole. And I know others who still live in well, this is what I grew up with, and this is what happened to me, and kind of still put the blame on the circumstances,
We do like to externalize.
Yeah,
we do like
tough,
to externalize.
It's tough.
Well, guys, I wanted to say how honored I am to have you both on the Quick, and this has been an incredibly important conversation to have. And I was inspired to start this series in the fall, and I couldn't. I had done a similar thing after the George Floyd murder, and we had a panel of like 10 people, and it was an incredible conversation. It took 4 hours, and I split it up, and then it was like four episodes, and then gone. But this time I'm doing it different. We're going to have these conversations in small conversations that I'm going to take on for as long, a couple of times a month, 3 times a month, as long as I can, to keep this conversation in the fore. Because I've learned from that experience that sometimes people see, they go, oh, I can just skip till next week, or I'll wait till next time. So I want to thank you so much for kicking off this series with Wear Yellow Proudly and the Dallas Opera. And I just wanted to ask, are there any parting thoughts or parting words you'd like to have before we sign off from the first episode here?
No, I've said everything I want to say, and just Michael, thank you so much. This was just so it was really like heartfelt, and I felt we could just, freely all share all different experiences, and it was really beautiful. Thank you. And I'm so glad that you're having other people on this topic, because I think we all have very different, we all have such different things to contribute. So it'd be nice to hear. I'm looking forward to watching and hearing a range of perspectives on stuff. So
Michael, thank you
Myra,
so much.
Thank you
This
so
was
much.
a beautiful time. So wonderful to see you after all these
All
years.
these years. Not that many years.
Just 3 years, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
thanks, and
Alrighty.
give Megan a hug as
I
well
will.
for us.
I will.
Yeah. Bye. Thank you.